myself. I'm Rich Conti, and I'm honored at this point to be entering my third year as the board chair for Angel Flight. And I think it's the third year of a 3-year term, so I'm going to be out of a job here in another 11 months or so. But it's been a terrific run, and we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking to interested folks in what the Angel Flight West board is all about, and generate some interest in folks who might be willing to serve on the board. So I wanted to thank you for your interest and thank you for attending today virtually. And Trevor, Moody, and I are going to walk you through this. Trevor is also a board member and chairman of our board management committee, which is one of the committees of the board. And we'll talk about board committees as part of this presentation. So I'll get us kicked off here. If you can advance the slide, Henny, we'll talk about what's on the agenda today. We're actually going to talk about 5 things. We'll start, fairly elementary. What is a board of directors? Why do we even have one? And what do they do? Which is bullet point number 2, the role of the board. We'll talk a little bit about the current board, who's on it, what it's made up of in terms of geographic representation, professional representation, gender, et cetera, et cetera. Then we'll talk a little bit about the board committees. The board is, as I said, organized by committee, and actually serving on board committees without being on the board is an opportunity and an option for people who are interested. A lot of our board members start out by lending their skills and capabilities to a board committee before coming on the board, and Trevor will talk about that as an option, and then get into a little more about what serving on the board is like and what we're actually looking for in terms of board participation. And then I think we'll have a way of handling questions from the group, and we'll wrap it up.
Richard,
okay, so let's start with what exactly is a board of directors? And Henny, you can advance us to the next slide.
Are you showing the slide? I'm not seeing it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't fix that on my end.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
No,
I can see it.
I went to 2 screens, sorry.
Okay, good. It looked good on my screen too. So what exactly is the board of directors? So the board of directors is a few things. Mostly it's composed of people who are passionate about what we do at Angel Flight, what our mission is. And these are people who are willing to offer what we call time, talent, and treasure. So time meaning being able to give time to board meetings, other activities that the board participates in, like the retreat that we've just completed or are completing this week. Talent, which is we look for certain types of skills, capabilities that can enhance the board's contribution to improving the Angel Flight organization and operations. And then treasure, of course, one of the most important things that a board does is both generate funds for the organization from their own capabilities, and then also attracting new donors to the organization as well. And all this in service of wanting to help the organization meet its overall mission. The other role of the board is that it's a governance organization. So we help guide the organization through things like operations, fiduciary responsibilities. And in doing this, we all draw on our experiences that we've gained throughout our lives. So the people on the board tend to be professional folks, people who are mature, have been in their careers for a while. We try to draw on diverse professional backgrounds as well as cultural backgrounds. And then we try to have a geographic representation that represents or kind of mirrors the Angel Flight West operating area. The bylaws of Angel Flight allow for a minimum of 14 board members and a maximum of 21. Today, we actually are full at 21 members, but one of the reasons that we're doing this lunch and learn is because we will have some board members rotating off this year in 2021. We had, Trevor, help me with this, but I think we had 6 people rotate off in 2020. Yeah. So we had, if you think about that, 6 of 21 is a pretty big chunk of folks. So we had some rotation this year, and we'll have some next year as well. Board members serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms. actually they serve one 3-year term, and then at their election and the board's election can serve a second consecutive 3-year term. Most do because most find it rewarding, and most people who get involved are able to contribute in a way that makes the board want them to stay on for a second 3-year term. Just my own personal experience, I first came on the board with Angel Flight in, I believe it was 2002. And I served on the board for 2 3-year terms until 2008, then was off the board until 2014, and then came back on the board. And I'm now actually beyond my 2 3-year terms, but there is this special exception for board chairs. They can serve out an additional year if their term as the board chair exceeds their term as a board member. So that just gives you a little sense of how our board is structured, some of the things that we do, and how we support and interface with the organization. So I'll turn it over to Trevor to continue from there in terms of some specifics on the duties and the rest of the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, great. So hi, everyone. My name's Trevor Moody. I'm on the board. I chair the board management committee, which, as Rich said, one of its responsibilities is recruiting new board members and so forth. And I'll give you my contact information at the end. So if any of you are interested in pursuing that discussion, well, feel free to reach out with Rich or I, and we can talk more about that. But hopefully this presentation will answer a few of that questions. So Rich has covered a lot of this, but just getting into some of the specifics, and we'll talk a little bit more. Those of you who've been on boards before or interacted with boards of nonprofits, I think you find this fairly similar to those. So maybe the most important, in my view, is making sure that the organization is well governed and has strong leadership, working with Josh and his team to make sure that they're doing the right things around the organization, providing that leadership and so forth. We're not day-to-day, they are day-to-day, so making sure they have the resources they need and so forth, in my view, is maybe the most important thing we can do. Angel Flight relies on donations from a number of different sources, from individuals, from large donation bodies. Some of you will have heard about the large grant we got this year, or just recently, from the Hilton organization for $1 million. So those organizations definitely look to the board to make sure that their funds are going to be well stewarded by the organization. So they want to see that the board is well staffed. Ensuring that the organization is in good shape financially is always a focus and often a struggle for a nonprofit, and only more so in the pandemic right now. I'm pleased to say that this organization, as a nonprofit, has done about the best job I've ever seen in terms of nonprofits I've been involved with. They've really done a good job navigating the pandemic, but it still hasn't been easy. It's just a lot of unknowns, especially at the start, and the board has been very involved in that. A big chunk of where our money comes from is just fundraising. We'll talk a bit more about this, but there are a number of events that we do. We certainly expect board members to donate, and I'll talk more about just specific expectations on that. And then working with the staff on developing organizational strategy, policy, new capabilities. We're a nice size organization that, in my view, that we're big enough that we have systems and processes and professional structure, but it's not so big that an individual on the board can't have an impact. Even in the last month, I could name a number of things that have happened really as a result of individual board members contributing their expertise. And so it is a nice size that it's not too big, but not too small as well. And then, as I've said, recruiting new directors, and that's why we're here. Next slide, please, Anne. So here's our current board. So as Josh said, we're at 21. I'll talk a bit more about committees in a moment, but you have the executive committee and then members. Like any board, we're always working to improve representation, diversity, expertise. And I give a little bit of an example of that here, but in terms of representation, not surprisingly, there are a lot of pilots on the board, but you also definitely don't need to be a pilot. In fact, getting a few more folks who aren't just, another pilot. Not that there's anything wrong with being a pilot, I'm a pilot, but that's definitely not a requirement. We've tried to do a better job of representing the geographies served. In the past, it probably was a bit more dominated by the major areas like California and Washington, but I think you see that's become more diverse now. We serve the Western 12 states and are endeavoring to improve that, but it has gotten more representative of those 12 states over the last couple of years. Healthcare providers, we're serving a healthcare organization. So, for example, you see Dr. Jeff Ogerman over there, who joined just recently. He is an executive and senior surgeon at Children's Hospital in Seattle, which is a very important partner of ours. So having Dr. Ogerman on the board has just been great in terms of connections to that organization, but also representing healthcare expertise, especially through a pandemic. And he's been very influential in how we roll out the opportunities for pilots to get vaccinated. He's had a major impact on that. So I think we can always do better on more healthcare, whether that's physician or healthcare executives or others. Ben Anderson is an executive out in the Colorado Hospital Association. So having that connection has been very important. Patients and families, we tend to focus on the pilots and so forth, but at the end of the day, we are serving our passengers and their families. And Paula, who's out in Arizona, has been very involved in representing that. And we have been putting an effort into trying to reach more and have more representation on the board of people who've either experienced it or have experienced being a passenger with Angel Flight, or their families have been. We talked about strategic partners. I talked about children's. Carlos is executive with Horizon as part of Alaska, which most of you probably know is a very important partner with ours. And having Carlos as someone who is in the organization and seeing what their challenges are day to day and how best we can work with them has been really, really valuable. And then in terms of expertise, and this is not a complete list by any stretch, but I'll talk about the committees in a moment, but finance expertise, legal expertise, aviation safety, healthcare, information technology are all big parts of our organization, are critical to our success, and having folks with expertise on that represented on the board is really important. Next slide, please. And I will say, by the way, any questions as we go along, happy to save time for questions at the end, but if you have a question along the way, I'm happy to stop and talk about it on the fly. I thought this was an important slide to just focus on for a moment, because there's a few takeaways from this. Like any board, we have committees, and my personal view on these is it's all very well and important as a board member to show up for the board meetings and participate and contribute, but the real work gets done in the committees. And quite honestly, if you're going to have fun being on the board, it's going to be fun because you're involved in one or more of the committees. So I'd ask anyone who's interested to think about these committees. An important point that Rich made at the beginning too is that you don't need to be a board member to serve on a committee. And in fact, many of our committees are mostly staffed by folks who aren't board members. And so it's as one thing I've spoken with a friend recently about joining the board, and really encouraged him to reach out to one of the committees where he had an obvious connection and get involved there, because that's often, it's not a requirement, but it's often new board members have already been working with the organization pretty closely on one of these committees. I've put on here the chairs of each of these committees. So if you know these people or have connections, feel free to reach out to them directly. But I'm also happy, or Rich or Josh, happy to make a connection. If you see, hey, I'm a lawyer, I'm really interested in this and would like to get involved in the legal committee, which I would encourage, by the way, get connected with Zach, and he will take advantage of the free legal time there, because it's we have there's a lot to do there on a weekly, monthly basis. So audit, Noah France there, development, Mark Walper, that's fundraising and a lot of activities, which I think I'll talk a little bit more in a minute, but that's always the hard work. And as Mark said earlier, not always the most popular committee to join, because you've got to get out and ask people for money, but it's absolutely critical to the survival of the organization. And Mark's done a great job stewarding that. Finance with Kelsey. I mentioned Zach with legal. Zach is the only lawyer on the board, but runs a committee that has, I forget the name, he's told me that, but a lot of law firms that he pulls in on specific issues we might be dealing with, and has done a really good job sort of chairing that and bringing in resources as necessary. So for folks with legal expertise, that could be a great place to start. I mentioned, my role looking after board management, and at the moment I sort of pull in Rich and Josh and others as need be, but I could use more support there as we go through recruiting new board members over the next couple of years. Outreach, Paula has done a really good job with this. This is covers a number of areas, but probably simplest, it's focused on both pilot outreach and sort of the passenger healthcare side of it. So on the pilot side, we always need more pilots. We, even in a normal time, as we focus on our growth goals, often it is pilot availability is one of the major limits for us. And in the past, doing sort of 5,000 missions a year, we want to get much higher than that. And we think there's a huge need that we want to serve. So we can always use more pilots. And the organization and this committee spends a lot of time working out how can we get more pilots involved? How can we reduce some of the barriers for their involvement? One issue that comes up quite a bit is that pilots go through their training, but then for whatever reason, don't ever fly a mission. And how can we break down those barriers? That's been a focus of that committee. And then the other side of it is more on the healthcare side, and how can we make sure that healthcare organizations know about us, know how to reach us, know how to funnel patients who could benefit from our services to us. You would think that would be an easy thing to do, but as people have commented, it's not always that easy to give away free services, surprisingly, even when there's so much demand. So getting the word out and making sure people know how to get access to Angel Flight is, I think, so a big footprint there. Paul has added a few new members to that committee, but I think she could always use more help. Safety with Ali there, focused primarily on aviation safety and how we do that. That's a hard mission. How do you improve safety and build it into the culture? But Ali, along with our safety officer, Rich, have done a really good job there, always looking for people with expertise in that area. And then finally, technology. For those that you do know that Angel Flight lives and breathes day to day on aphids and other tech platforms that allow the organization to get the missions out to the pilots and make sure pilots are accepting them and managing the process on that. And Garrett is our chair of that. We've recently brought on one new member there, but folks with tech expertise, that's an important area for us. So just to give you a flavor of the committees, this is not cast in stone. We already talked today about a possible new committee, so things always change, but I just would leave you with a takeaway. If you are interested, not the only way, but a committee is an awesome way to get involved with the board of Angel Flight. Next slide, please. So just getting into the weeds a little bit here, because these are questions we often get, and I'm a fairly new board member. I've only been on for 2 years, and a lot of questions I had when I was looking at this. As Rich mentioned, the board terms are 3 years, and typically the maximum is two in sequence. Testament to the organization and the people who've come on is that most people do serve the 2 terms. They stay on for 6 years. And once again, I think a testament to the organization is that I think we have probably 3, maybe more people on the board right now who actually did the 6 years, timed out, went off and just couldn't stay away and came back onto the board. So it's not only 6 years, but that is what we plan for. And as I've been looking at our organization over the next few years, because these things take time to play out, over the next 2 years, we have about 8 people timing out. So although, as Rich said, we're at 21 today, so we're full, don't think that means that there's no opportunities for you to come on the board in the near future. Just about every quarterly cycle, there's 1 or 2 folks who are timing out and a seat is opening up. So it's definitely a moving target. As I said, the meetings are quarterly, and in a normal world, when we actually can meet in person, which I think we all miss dearly, we tend to rotate around the wings. So really throughout the Western US, you do that, and it's been pretty cool to go to those different locations. The committees really meet as needed, and typically they're going to be 4 times a year with the sort of to coincide with the board meetings, but not necessarily. Some are busier than that and just meet ad hoc on more frequent basis. Sometimes it's quieter and there aren't so many meetings, but that's 4 is pretty typical. And certainly the expectation is members will participate in 1 or more committees. As I said, that's the fun part, but it's also the expectation of folks are going to roll their sleeves up and get involved in at least one of the committees. The other expectation is attending the events. You've heard about the Endeavour Awards, Golf Classic, other fundraisers. It's important to attend those because we get money from them, but it's also important just to build momentum and the number of people attending and so forth, and build the energy around them. Just more is better, and board members, to the degree they can, are encouraged to join into those meetings. And then finally, the top question for a lot of people is, well, what am I expected to contribute in terms of dollars on an annual basis? We don't have a specific guidance, but as I say here, I think the guidance we do give is that Angel Flight as a organization will be a giving priority for you. So it'll be something that you care, an amount that you care about, and such that you think about doing it, and also that you'll care about how those dollars are spent. So as I say, no specific guidance, and we've got a wide range of capacity amongst folks on the board, and that's totally fine, and that won't change. But we do expect everyone to donate, and donate in a way that's meaningful for them. And also say here, give or get. And if you haven't heard that term before, I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but for the events and so forth, you encourage friends, colleagues, others to come to the Endeavour Awards, for example, and that's the get part. So you don't have to do it all yourself, but that doesn't mean you're necessarily off the hook, and bring other people along and who are going to write checks as well, because that's the lifeblood of the organization. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, but happy to answer any questions. But why should you consider serving? Is that if you're excited about Angel Flight, and I assume you're here because you are, being on the board is just an awesome way to contribute to the long-term success of Angel Flight. I've found it just very satisfying on a number of levels, number of things I've been able to get involved with. And as you've probably gotten the sense, the other directors are passionate about Angel Flight as well, both in terms of the mission, whether that's from the aviation component, the giving back, the healthcare, or all of the above. And I think you find that the board meetings are terrific. This retreat, testament to the staff, this retreat this week has been outstanding and really captured a lot of the great points about previous in-person retreats. But I think if you get involved, you'll find that future retreats, past retreats and future retreats in person are just outstanding sort of weekend gatherings where there's just always stuff going on. Everyone's super energized about the organization, and my experience at least has been that there's formal meetings, but then outside the meetings, you're bumping into people have got ideas, and you end up having discussions at the bar or at the outside or whatever about various opportunities and projects and so forth. And it's just a terrific organization, and the events they put on also generate a lot of energy. In my experience, also, the staff's been great to work with. We're providing support for them, but they're sponges for the input from the board, and which makes your participation as a board member really feel good, that your time, talent, and treasure are appreciated by the staff. And I've said this before, but just it's a nice size organization that it's got the systems in place, but it's still extremely entrepreneurial and has some big visions for the future. So if you're interested, it's not that hard. Get involved, get in touch with either staff, Josh, or other folks that you know there, or Rich or I. Put our emails there. Feel free to reach out, and we can talk about it. I think you heard it loud and clear, but involvement in a committee is a great way to get started and see if you like it. And yeah, you don't need to be a board member to serve on that committee. So that's all I had. I'm happy to answer any questions with Rich. I think there might be some coming up, but yeah, Angel Flight. So any questions you have, feel free to ask away. Let's see.
The sign of a good presentation, Trevor.
I guess so, yeah. I must have answered everything, so.
Question from Yehoram. Sorry if I mispronounced.
Yeah, good question. So when do board member terms begin, end, and are they annual or rolling? No, yeah, good question. So they typically, because board members are nominated at board meetings, it just starts at that board meeting. So then it just rolls the 3 years past that. So they're not annual per se. We just track them from board meeting to board meeting, just because that's when board members get voted on to the board.
I have Yehoram. He's on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I just wanted to ask a general question. Do this organization have a long-term plan or a long-term goal, or we're dealing with projects as they come and entrepreneurship as it develops? So that's my question.
Rich, do you want to take that? I'm happy to.
Maybe you could take another try at the question. I'm not sure what you're asking. I'll answer the long-term question. We do have a long-term strategic plan that's oriented towards growth of our services. It's also oriented towards, our budget, for example, runs for 24 months rather than 12. We're always looking as far down the road as we can realistically to make sure that we're funded to meet the strategic goals that we have in mind. Our main focus from a long-term standpoint is on expanding the footprint of our mission delivery. So we've set a long-term goal of doubling the number of missions that we do a year. We're doing somewhere around 4,000 missions a year now. We want to double that to 8,000. So 8,000 people or 8,000 different mission transportations for medical needs. But beyond that, I don't know if that gets at your question or not.
You answered the question. That's what I asked.
Good, very well.
Yeah, I got a question for you guys. So this is Angel Flight West in the board. How does the board activity fit within the rest of the organizations in the US? And is there still an Angel Flight overall organization, or at least the coordination national? How does that all together these days?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, and Josh, jump in if I'm not representing it correctly. The Angel Flight organizations in the US are all separate independent organizations. Right. So, I mean, that's the bottom line. Josh can say the number, but it's a few angel flight organizations around the country. There is a national body that we're a major member of, but that's more of a board. We don't report into it. It's a body that helps all the angel flights around the country and their members on to deal with lobby issues or other issues that might be important to all angel flights. But the bottom line is all the individual ones are independent. Josh, is that fair?
Yeah, Mark's got a little bit of background on this. Angel Flights remain to be their own 501c3s. There is still a group called Air Charity Network, which used to be Angel Flight America, if you remember that.
That's what it was, yes.
Yeah, it is still functional, but it's not transformational. So we meet quarterly. I serve on the board there. Actually, I'm the current chair. So it's more best practices and information exchange, but it's not actively trying to use it as a national platform, which is how it was originally founded, to my understanding. And then Air Care Alliance, which goes outside of those kind of 5 groups that share the same name, Angel Flight, and it's more about public benefit and volunteer pilot organizations in general. Same thing. It's more of a best practices, although they have hired a staff person and they are doing some platform-based type stuff. So that is evolving a little bit. Our board historically, and I can say currently, is interested in actively involving, trying to figure out better efficiencies of scale on a national level. And we have been engaged with different angel flights for kind of mergers, acquisitions type stuff. There's a whole host of things to navigate around that we haven't done successfully yet, but something that still remains a priority for us moving forward.
So that's a topic of discussion then in like exec committee?
Correct. Yeah, not even exec committee. It's more just on our overall growth goals. So as we've been experiencing and learning things, we share stuff, and we created the software, and that's shared now with 13 or 14 different groups. And there's a whole host of things we're trying to do to keep the sort of industry moving forward. But there's a whole other host of hurdles and obstacles that we are kind of banging our heads against that we would like to see in some fashion be resolved. And so what that looks like has varied. But that is something that we would continue to like to see, all hands pulling on oars equally that are doing similar.
There's definitely some opportunity there. I agree. So
yeah.
And then just a quick follow on, is the board active with other charity aviations in the West Coast, like Pilot and Pause? Do you guys interact, and who does that?
The boards don't interact all that often. I'm interacting a lot with those counterparts, both through the groups I talked about and just personal relationships.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the committees and how the committees are working together? How many people are on each of the subcommittees? And is there a commitment there in terms of meeting time, regularity, or projects they're involved in right now? You were particularly talking about, pilot outreach, and then I'm curious, my background is finance. What are subcommittee people doing there?
Yeah. It's, as you can imagine, there's a lot of variability there that range in size from probably one person to outreach has added a few. There might be 5 or 6 right now. So it really varies. But examples we talked about on the outreach. Josh, you might be more familiar of projects that they're focused on right now.
Yeah, so outreach is 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5 currently. Yeah. And there are no formal subcommittees, but that should change here probably in the next few weeks from what I'm hearing from that committee. The type of subcommittees that I anticipate that would come out of that, one would be hospital outreach, both on the executive level, but also on the kind of social worker, case management, patient navigator level. Another one, pilot outreach has been one that's been pretty consistent for us, and one that's been pretty successful too. And then there's a whole host of other kind of new initiatives, everything from social worker training to conferences and different things, which would probably be like a third one for new strategies to come out of that. On the finance side, you mentioned those subcommittees are pretty well defined. There's an investment committee that meets and reviews kind of quarterly results that the board employs a fund manager that does that, and they give him guidelines, and he and their facility invest those actively. So they review those on a quarterly basis. Then there's an audit subcommittee of the finance committee, which actually has to be, for best practices, at least 50% non-finance committee members and not the treasurer involved in that one. Laura is on the line. Laura, am I missing any of the finance subcommittees? No, okay. Yeah, so that's kind of how that works. And then in terms of frequency, as Trevor mentioned, it's usually at least once between every board meeting, but often sometimes twice for most committees.
Josh, I have a question. You had said something about the board when it meets in person 4 times a year. Where typically are those meetings held? And since I'm assuming that some people would be traveling distance, is it like a 1-day, half-day, 2-day event? What is typically the 4 board meetings, the itinerary and the agenda?
I'll let Trevor and Rich take that one.
Yeah. So yeah, Jeff. Hey, Jeff. Good to see you. They're as I said, they kind of rotate around. I think center of gravity has been Southern California because that's where the headquarters is. But I think Josh and crew have done a good job of moving them all around the 12 Western states. So pick your location. They've been around, and I think it's just sort of local folks advocate for a board meeting in their area. Itinerary wise, I think it's fair to say, and it's going back a little ways now, but it's in a day, right? So the board meeting is in a day. So fly in the night before, leave the evening after is very doable. I don't know whether it can be done in a day. Maybe it can. I guess we're not doing this anymore because Zoom gives you flexibility. But in the past, I guess we did the executive committee and the full board meeting in a day, right, Josh and Rich?
That's right. Yeah, in a typical environment, other than this year, it's typically on a Friday, and it's usually Friday afternoon. So it's usually like a lunch to 2, 3-ish. So you could actually fly in and fly out if you want. And then we try to do something local when we travel. So invite volunteers and patients and requesters out, do a happy hour or a dinner or something. So there's a social component. But if you're strictly just coming from the meeting, yes, you could potentially go in and out. And then, for the board members that are volunteer pilots, I would say maybe half of them try to fly there themselves, and others are just using commercial just for time frequency. And then the only exception of that is the one-time annual retreat, which is what this week-long thing has been. That is usually a 2-day thing that we ask board members to be a part of. And on that one, we usually kick it off with the board meeting and then do the strategy session, like to do the motions, and then do the strategy sessions after that to kind of cast the vision and goals for the coming year and future years.
So typically one of the board meetings that you're talking about would be at the annual, whatever you call it, retreat, like what we're at right now. So that would be one of them. But are you saying like Washington, Oregon? Are you going to have one out there? Arizona, New Mexico, something like that?
Yep, exactly.
We always have one here. In recent years, it's been in conjunction with the Endeavor Award, so it's like part of the weekend. Annual retreat is usually warm weather, just because people want to get away, and it's usually in a February timeframe like it is now. So that'll be, Phoenix, Las Vegas, New Mexico, Southern California. And then we do have a good contingency of members along the West Coast. So, it's not infrequent that we're meeting in Seattle, sometimes the Bay Area, but then, we've gone Salt Lake City, Montana, Idaho, you name it.
Yeah.
Oh,
maybe just one thing else. Oh, sorry, hi, Jake, just one wrap up item on that, because I have been asked this a bit, is is the travel to the board meetings reimbursed by Angel Flight, or is that on the members? And it is on the members. So folks are asked to work out their own travel and pay for that. So just so folks know.
I did learn in the tax session this week that is tax deductible though. All those.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, good point. It is.
Yeah.
Hi,
I've got a
Jake.
question with
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
the pandemic has really changed meetings over the last year. And the longer it's gone on, the better the online meetings have become, especially with Zoom. And this session has been excellent. We've had a lot of people, a lot of interaction. So my question is, Josh, what do you think the future holds over the next 3 years in terms of the mix between in-person meetings and online meetings?
Great question. For the short-term future, I think the online thing still happens. I'm personally of the opinion that you can't trade in-person interaction and the energy you get person to person. So something that I would continue to push for. But I do think that we'll always have a component of this for folks that can't join. I know that in years past we've always had that with a conference call, right? And even if you can't attend, you're calling in. But we all know those are like super hard. But at least in this setting, you could do both and still see what's going on in the room and feel a level more of engagement than you would otherwise. So I'm sure that'll be some sort of combination of both.
Good.
We have a question in the chat from Jim Hessman. Is there a written vision for AFW, not the goals for the near future, but what will AFW look like in 3 to 5 years or more?
Yeah, I can take a piece of that if you'd like. As I mentioned, there is a kind of I'll call it a medium-term operating vision that or operating set of goals that we focus on pretty tightly. But beyond that, there are really 2 places that you find an articulation of the organization's mission and vision. One is just in our documentation, some of which you can find on the website, as to what it is what we consider to be our vision and mission, and then more specifically in what Josh and the organization call the Ascent to 8,000, which is our drive to meet that 8,000 missions flown, which is the main metric, but it also precipitates a whole lot of actions and organizational needs, funding needs, operating needs that really drive towards that kind of single-minded vision of an organization that is constantly expanding its operational and service footprint. And Josh, you can probably say a little more about that more articulately than I can, because it's really your vision.
Yeah, we have a vision statement, and our audacious vision statement is to remove transportation as a barrier to healthcare, period. So that's the big vision statement. And then yes, different versions of that and different year plans. Typically on an annual retreat like this, we look in the 2 to 5 year window in terms of our strategic planning and road mapping, and then are always course correcting. And part of the reason we build this planning weekend each year is so that we can continue to pivot and adapt based on new information and new situations that pop up.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions, so if we're at the end there, we might wrap up. Thanks, everyone. You've got the information to follow up with Rich or Josh or I if you want more information, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much for your interest, and thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Great to see you all again. One more.